Imagine discovering a mysterious handwritten book filled with vivid paintings, cryptic symbols, and conversations with voices that don't belong to this world. A book that looks like it was crafted by a medieval mystic or a prophet in exile, yet it's modern, deeply psychological, and utterly human. This is no ordinary journal. It's a portal into the human soul, a descent into the depths where dreams blur with reality, where myth and madness intertwine. The pages feel alive, charged with emotion, color, and meaning. You turn each one cautiously, sensing you're intruding on a sacred ritual, something never meant to be seen. But the book exists, it's real, and its contents shake the very foundations of how we understand ourselves. What would compel someone to spend years documenting not just thoughts, but visions, encounters with gods, monsters, inner guides, and dark truths that defy explanation? Who paints their inner demons with such care? Who dares to have actual conversations with their own soul and then writes it all down? Not for fame, not for science, but for survival. The author of this book risked everything, sanity, reputation, and comfort, for a journey that led not into the world, but inward. It's haunting, beautiful, and deeply unsettling. This isn't fiction or art therapy, it's a record of a real psychological journey, where the veil between conscious and unconscious is torn open. What lies inside isn't just personal, it speaks a universal language, one that calls out to all of us. Do you know who you really are beneath your roles, your labels, your logic? This book was locked away for decades, hidden from public eyes. And now that it's been revealed, the question remains, are you ready to face what it shows? Because once you enter, you may never see your inner world the same way again. At the crossroads of imagination and reality lies a manuscript unlike any other. A book crafted in silence, painted with visions, and written in the language of the soul. This extraordinary work emerged not from the need for acclaim or recognition, but from an urgent personal quest. It was created during a time of inner upheaval, when the boundaries between the conscious mind and the deeper forces within were beginning to blur. The author, facing an overwhelming flood of images, symbols, and voices from the unconscious, made a decision that few would dare to make, to surrender to the experience and document every step of the descent into the psyche. The result is a massive, red, leather-bound volume that defies traditional categories. It's part journal, part myth, part psychological revelation. Its pages are filled with ornate calligraphy and rich symbolic paintings that echo ancient manuscripts and religious texts. But this is no ordinary spiritual book. It contains vivid dialogues with inner figures, dream-like journeys through fantastic landscapes, and philosophical reflections that explore the very nature of the self, meaning, and the human condition. Each page pulses with urgency and intensity, not simply to describe what was seen, but to capture its truth and integrate its message. This manuscript was kept hidden for decades, shielded from public view, not because it lacked value, but because it was deeply personal, too raw, too powerful, too strange to share with a world that might not understand. Yet its contents are anything but isolated. They speak to a universal experience, the inner struggle, the search for meaning, the confrontation with one's shadow, and the hope of transformation. The process, captured within its pages, is not just a story of one person's confrontation with the unknown, but a symbolic map of the journey that each person must eventually face. Now that it has emerged from secrecy, this book invites us to witness an unfiltered encounter with the unconscious. It challenges us to recognize the depths that lie beneath our everyday awareness, and it whispers a profound truth, that within the chaos of inner conflict lies the seed of wisdom. The journey recorded here is both deeply personal and profoundly collective. It is not merely to be read, but to be experienced, felt, and reflected upon as a mirror of our own hidden depths. There are moments in life when the familiar structures of thought, belief, and identity begin to crack, not because of external catastrophe, but because of something stirring from within. Something unexplainable, irrational, yet undeniably real. For some, this inner disturbance begins quietly, through vivid dreams, sudden moods, or an inexplicable pull toward the symbolic and the strange. For others, it erupts more violently, shaking the foundations of everything once thought to be stable. In either case, the challenge is not just recognizing this internal shift, but deciding what to do when it happens. Most turn away. The unconscious is a frightening landscape. It doesn't obey logic or language. It speaks in images, riddles, and emotions that often contradict everything we've been taught to believe about ourselves and the world. Society offers little guidance on how to navigate such terrain. In fact, much of modern life is designed to suppress it, through distraction, routine, and the constant noise of external validation. But what happens when suppression no longer works? When dreams become messages, when inner voices demand attention? When the soul calls out for meaning? The real problem isn't the emergence of the unconscious. It's our refusal to engage with it. To truly listen requires courage. It demands letting go of the need for control, embracing ambiguity, and entering a dialogue with forces that may appear chaotic, dark, or even dangerous. The greatest challenge is learning to discern whether these forces are symptoms of collapse or signs of transformation. This requires a willingness to step into the unknown, to risk one's sanity in pursuit of deeper understanding. And yet without this inner descent, something vital remains unexplored. There can be no real growth without struggle, no awakening without first passing through confusion. The challenge then is not to eliminate the darkness, but to face it, to enter it consciously, not as a victim, but as a seeker. It is in this descent where the ego is stripped of its illusions, where the self is tested, and where the possibility of wholeness first emerges. The problem is clear. How does one survive and make sense of a reality that defies reason? How does one navigate the inner world without losing themselves in the process? The journey inward is as dangerous as it is necessary. The journey inward begins not with certainty, but with surrender. Once the conscious mind allows the deeper layers of the psyche to speak, a strange process unfolds. Images arise unbidden, voices emerge from the silence, and characters that seem both foreign and familiar step forward. These are not hallucinations or fantasies in the traditional sense. They are expressions of a deeper truth that the surface mind has long ignored. The figures that appear may be wise, terrifying, seductive, or obscure. Some offer guidance, others challenge or disturb, but each one holds a piece of something essential, the hidden self. Rather than running from these encounters, the explorer learns to engage them directly, through a method of deep inner attention, often described as a form of active imagination. The boundary between the inner and outer world becomes porous. Dialogues unfold not with real people, but with symbolic figures, archetypal presences that represent forces within the human condition. Conversations are held, choices are made, and a narrative begins to take shape. It is not guided by logic, but by a rhythm, something ancient, intuitive, and instinctive. Visual symbols play a crucial role. Instead of writing alone, the seeker often paints or draws what is seen within. Mandalas, creatures, mythical beings, landscapes, each becomes a visual anchor for what is otherwise ineffable. These images serve as a bridge between the unconscious and conscious mind, helping to integrate the material rather than letting it remain buried or overwhelming. The process is creative, yet disciplined. One must remain open, but not passive, receptive, but not consumed. It is a dance with the unknown. Over time, certain themes emerge: the descent into shadow, the confrontation with death, the encounter with divine or demonic forces, and the search for unity between opposites. The internal landscape reveals itself as rich, multi-layered, and strangely intelligent. It speaks in symbols because symbols allow contradiction to exist side by side. Through this symbolic language, the individual gains access to something greater than themselves, something that has always been present but rarely acknowledged. The work is not easy. It demands honesty, vulnerability, and the patience to sit with discomfort. But in exploring this inner world, something begins to change. The mind expands, the heart opens, and slowly the pieces of a deeper identity start to form. Amid the labyrinth of symbols, voices, and visions, a turning point arrives, not with fanfare, but with quiet intensity. It is the moment when the inner world, once seen as chaotic and fragmented, reveals its coherence. A particular figure appears, one that feels profoundly different from all others encountered so far. This presence does not command with fear or seduce with mystery. Instead, it radiates wisdom, stillness, and deep knowing. The seeker senses immediately that this is not just another aspect of the self, but a guide, an embodiment of inner truth, long buried beneath layers of ego, fear, and societal conditioning. In dialogue with this figure, something remarkable happens. The seeker begins to distinguish between the voice of personal desire and the voice of the deeper self. The inner landscape, once overwhelming, now starts to organize itself around a center. That center is not the conscious mind, but something more ancient, more whole. This moment marks a shift from being overwhelmed by unconscious content to becoming an active participant in one's own transformation. The images are no longer seen as threats, but as messengers. The inner figures, once feared, become teachers. What was once interpreted as madness now feels like revelation. The darkness was not a void, but a womb, a space in which something new was gestating. The pain, confusion, and isolation were part of a larger process that could not be understood until now. This realization does not erase a struggle, but it reframes it. The descent was not a fall, but a necessary return, a journey back to something forgotten and essential. Symbols that once appeared random now fit together in meaningful patterns. Opposites begin to reconcile. The self is no longer split between conscious and unconscious, light and dark, reason and intuition. There is a glimpse, however brief, of wholeness. In this moment, the seeker understands that true wisdom does not come from avoiding the inner world, but from passing through it. The guide within confirms this, not with answers, but with presence. A new relationship with the self is born, one grounded not in control or certainty, but in trust and inner alignment. From this point on, the journey continues, but with a sense of direction and a deep knowing that one is not alone. The journey through the depths of the psyche is never linear, never clean. It twists and turns, often obscured by uncertainty, fear, and paradox. But for those who dare to engage it fully, a transformation quietly unfolds. What begins as a crisis, a collapse of certainty, an invasion of strange dreams, a confrontation with inner chaos, becomes the gateway to something more profound. It is not an escape from reality, but a re-entry into it, this time with a deeper awareness of what lies beneath the surface. The figures encountered, the visions experienced, the symbols drawn or written, each plays a role in stitching together a more complete sense of self. These elements are not meaningless projections, but reflections of real psychological forces. Through sustained attention and honest engagement, the seeker begins to piece together a new kind of internal order. This is not a return to the old, familiar identity, but the emergence of a self that has faced its own fragmentation and come through changed. The process is never about perfection, it's about integration, the light and dark, the rational and the intuitive, the past and the potential. All are welcomed into a broader sense of being, the work of descent, of vision, of dialogue with the inner world leads not to answers carved in stone, but to a relationship with the unknown that is grounded in openness rather than fear. Looking back, what once seemed terrifying or nonsensical now feels essential. Every image, every shadow, every strange message from within carried a thread of meaning. By following those threads, the individual doesn't just explore the psyche, they participate in its unfolding. The self is not a fixed object, but a living process, always becoming, always growing through its own contradictions. In the end, the manuscript stands not just as a record of one person's experience, but as a mirror for all who seek. It reminds us that the journey inward, though difficult, is one of the most vital and courageous paths a person can take. To witness the unknown within is to reclaim a part of ourselves that modern life too often asks us to abandon. And in that reclamation, we rediscover our depth, our mystery, and our wholeness. Now that the door to the inner world has been opened, the invitation is clear. Begin your own journey. Not a journey of escape or fantasy, but one of truth. Raw, symbolic, and deeply personal. The manuscript that was once hidden now serves as a silent guide, offering more than just insight. It offers permission to explore your dreams without dismissal, to listen to the quiet voice within that often gets drowned out by daily noise, to trust the images that arise in your imagination, and to engage your soul in conversation. You don't need to be a psychologist, artist, or mystic to begin. You need only curiosity, honesty, and the willingness to be still with yourself. Start by writing down your dreams. Pay attention to recurring symbols. Notice the emotions you avoid and the thoughts that keep circling back. Begin a dialogue with these parts of you. Ask questions and listen, not for logical answers, but for meaning. You may find that the symbols begin to speak. You may discover aspects of yourself you never acknowledge, parts that have been waiting to turn inward. Create space in your life for reflection, journal, draw, meditate. Walk alone in nature. Use whatever tools you feel drawn to, but commit to the practice. The unconscious will respond to sincerity. The more you engage with it, the more it reveals. This is not a path with a clear destination. It is a process of deepening, of becoming whole through connection with what was once hidden. If the manuscript teaches anything, it is that the soul has its own language, and that language is rich with guidance, healing, and wisdom. The world outside often asks you to conform. The world inside asks you to wake up. Accept the invitation. Make your own red book, whatever that looks like for you. Enter the dialogue with your deeper self. You may not find all the answers, but you will uncover the questions that matter. And in that unfolding, you will find a truth that belongs uniquely to you. This is your moment. The descent begins the moment you decide to listen. The inner world is waiting. Will you answer the call?